Well, well, well. I see that little thing. We are 6 seconds in to the live episode, and no one here needs an introduction. This is the third time that you can watch me and the King of New York talk. The first time was a little over 2 years ago, believe it or not. We talked about does org maturity in design actually exist? And we answered that equivocally or whatever. No, it does not. And then last June, we talked about AI in the age of design. And Hong, since June till now, I literally do not think a single thing we might have talked about could still be relevant with the kind of cliff that has occurred in the design industry. I can't even quite pinpoint it. I think it has a lot to do with agentic coding reaching kind of a tipping point really late last year, and now it's snowballing out of control. And so I think let's just reboot the conversation. Welcome to the show. I want to catch up on everything that you've been up to over the last few months, and just like get into like what is going on inside the Designosphere and what are your thoughts?
Did you
AI
have to call it
hiring.
that? I just
Do I
watched it
have to?
last night. I
I
watched the
uh,
Designosphere last night, which is
I watched it a few
interesting.
days ago, and I was really upset by it. I don't like I was like I don't get upset by stuff, but watching it, I felt emotionally and physically repulsed in a way that I wasn't expecting. So it was
Yeah.
a deeply unpleasant experience
I just feel bad for the 13-year-olds.
for the kids who watch and follow it and try to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
that whole thing. And I mean, but I mean, look, like we might dip into that because I think the Venn diagram of manosphere, tech bros, NFT day traders, and then vibe coders, people running OpenClaw networks are there's probably a lot of overlap of people who are
Yeah.
token maxing and looks maxing at the same time.
I don't know if I'm really involved in that area because I feel like that's very much on Twitter or X, and I am just not
Yeah,
there. So,
I'm not either, and that's
yeah.
I don't think that's much of our audience either. I think we're talking more to the designers who are
Yeah.
your audience, where well, both of ours, wondering what the hell does anybody do now? What
Yeah, what
is who's doing what for work? What are the jobs? Who's hiring? Who's not? What do these layoffs mean? What do you see as a recruiter? Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer because I'm not in the world of
yeah.
jobs and hiring, but you still have that hook into there. So, like, lay it out for us.
I don't actually. I haven't done recruiting for several months now. And normally I would be comfortable talking about it more because I feel that design hiring tends to be fairly static or stable,
Hmm.
but not in the last several months. So I do think a lot has changed, but not in ways that people would expect. I think the way we hire designers is evolving, but more so on a hype or marketing basis as opposed to actual logical evolution of hiring more effectively. So one example I can give is I remember years ago when we
Hmm.
sat in an interview panel, there would be rubrics or
Hmm.
matrices of people's skill set and how we would rate them. And there would be clear guidelines how you would rate that. Why would somebody be considered a 5 out of 5 for visual design or strategy or research capabilities would be clearly delineated and outlined so that even if you're not uh, a super expert in any of these areas, you can kind of tell this is how you would rate somebody. And you would consolidate the scores and then make a hiring decision around that. And I feel like nowadays that's not really the case because hiring around AI capabilities or AI skills is a key component of it. And we still haven't figured out how do we hire for that or how do we evaluate somebody's abilities in this area
Yeah.
since it's so new, it's changing so quickly, and I want to say we're hiring based on vibes right now. Like it's so new and nascent that we're considering personal projects as a
Whoa.
as a way to evaluate somebody. When years ago that was kind of a big no-no or taboo.
Yeah.
Like, you, if somebody has personal projects in their portfolio, it's a sign that they're very junior. They don't have
Yeah.
real world experience. They haven't worked at a place, because if they did, they would have put that actual work experience in your portfolio, and instead they're
Mm.
doing redesigns or they're doing a personal project of some kind. And nowadays, because of how slow certain companies are in adopting AI practices in their processes and workflows, and at the same time they're demanding a high level of AI capability, you're now resorting to doing personal projects on your own personal time in order to fulfill the higher requirement across the board.
So I'm gonna break character and not do funny stuff. I'm gonna do real questions for a second. So I agree with everything. I mean, I'm with you on most of this, and I exist a little bit outside of the normal rubric because I'm one of the edge case technology fluent types of designers who understands and knows all this stuff just from the experience of working in it. So starting up agents and creating repositories and work trees and all that. It's like, yeah, I already knew all that. I just never had time or energy to do it because I had a prime time career as like the design and service design. But now that engineering can become in the forefront, I can do it. But most people didn't spend half their career in engineering. And so talking about the hiring, what people are looking for, I'll call out everybody right now. Companies could barely keep up with the technologies and the capabilities and expectations before people were looking at AI. And so, where do you think this where's like fact or fiction where people want to design, for AI native, whatever. And then at the same time, it's like Figma just turned on metered token usage yesterday. Most of these companies, they're not doing AI in the company. They don't have anything to evaluate it against. They have firewalls and whatever. I mean, I worked at NASA for 2 years. I never got my Figma request approved before I had to leave. It was that slow. And big enterprises. I remember working at Intuit when Sketch became popular enough to be a thing. It took us like a year just because of enterprise site licensing and whatever. We had an expiring contract with Fireworks and Creative Cloud. So where do you think the reality is of everyone's talking about hiring for design and prepping for design when the reality is I don't think companies can just shift to start working this way, even when they want to, outside of labs or sandbox type of special projects.
Yeah, I think I want to say reality either doesn't exist or it's so
That's a hard one.
overlapped with marketing and hype right now that it becomes reality. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways, because
Mm,
there's just so much need and hype and also bluster from a lot of designers that they're doing all this super, cutting edge stuff.
mm-hmm,
And where is it exactly? It's hard to tell. I think, we do need to start delineating between large enterprise companies, government entities like NASA, and
yeah,
also smaller, more cutting, I don't want to say cutting edge, but like startups, right? So I would say companies like Block and Ramp probably have more AI mature operations than, uh,
yeah,
you know, large enterprise companies like Bloomberg or JPMC. Unfortunately, they're just way more red tape when it comes to adopting these technologies.
mm-hmm,
And at the same time, we are, I don't know why exactly, but I mean, I kind of know why, but it still confuses me why a lot of designers feel the need to talk about AI in a superlative way in order to market themselves, perhaps, or to get attention, or I don't know exactly, but a lot of the things that people say when you dig deep into it, you realize this is cool as an idea or concept,
mm-hmm.
or you made something work as a prototype, but does it actually work in a real environment? That's questionable. I'm very skeptical about that. I've been on the lookout for examples where people are really truly AI native, are creating a ton of value in using AI tooling. And there are some examples I've seen where there are issues because, I'm not a design system designer
Right.
and I'm not super technical as a designer either. So when I see that, I'm a little bit, you know, skeptical and also confused because I'm not the subject matter expert who's able to fully evaluate how this thing works. So from the outside looking in, it seems like most of the value that's being derived right now are in two areas. One is in design systems, and typically done by experienced design engineers who are
Mm-hmm.
leveraging AI, similar to how engineers are leveraging AI, because I do think there is some value or efficiency that's being created there. But on the design side, I'm like really skeptical because, yes, there are some efficiencies created by people who are designers who are talking about, okay, I'm now able to iterate or ideate much more quickly, or I'm able to ingest research data. But there are still issues with that, and the output oftentimes isn't as good as people think they are. Like they kind of oversell it a little bit. So I think design system is one area, but that's only in my opinion because of the technology or the coding side of
Mm-hmm.
things, which AI is more capable of. And like one example I can think of is, as a designer, I've used AI tooling a lot in the last several months, but I realized I wasn't using it to design, even though I am a designer. I was using it to code and to build
Right.
because that's where the value is. Like I can get something to work as opposed to make it look nicer because I can, unfortunately or fortunately, Figma is still the best way for me to express my ideas or my vision of how something should look and feel. Whereas if I want to build or make something that works, then AI is really the best tool for it. So I do think there's an overlap between coding technologies and also design systems that you're seeing more value out of AI tooling. And then
Mm.
the other area would be perhaps using AI tools to create more efficiency, like using agents to summarize things or to help assist in your research, things of that sort. Um, I don't know how effective that is in the hiring sense because when most recruiters and hiring managers talk about AI design skills, they're not really thinking about how efficient are you. And one of the biggest issues I see is a lot of companies or hiring manager or designers in general are talking about AI native or AI first.
Mm.
And I think one that is super poorly defined
Yeah.
because depending on who you ask, they have a different idea or definition of it. And it usually leads back to who they think they are themselves. So they
Interesting.
would say my abilities, like, because like if you look at AI design skills, I could like chop it up into 3 to 5 areas. And every time somebody says they're AI or native or first, it's almost always their own skills that's being used as a paradigm as opposed to looking at a greater ecosystem and then
Yeah.
evaluating it that way, which is extremely biased. So you're at the end of the day, AI native, in my opinion, or taste or any of those connotations are based on, it's like a dog whistle in some ways. It's like I am aligning with this other group that has more
Mm.
influence and power than I do. And I'm using the same language, the same coded language they're using so that they know I'm part of this club, even though we don't really understand what that definition is, perhaps. So yeah, it's frustrating because I get into arguments with people like Tommy Gioco quite often, and
Mm-hmm.
I just want to figure out like what do you mean by AI first or AI native? Like
I
define
would love
that.
to know. What do you
I
mean?
mean,
What does anyone mean? Not you, but like what does it mean? What have you heard? I mean,
okay,
I have my opinions, but you're the guest here.
okay. My opinion is there are a few ways we can talk about this. I think one is I'm no longer using Figma, and
Right.
I'm no longer using the traditional design process, however you want to define that, which might be
Mm-hmm.
we do research, we do validation testing, we create prototypes to get buy-in from the greater organization before we are able to align and ship something. And nowadays we are just going to go right ahead, and whatever ideas we have, we prototype it quickly because now building is extremely inexpensive, and
Mm-hmm.
our ideas are really the things that separate us from other companies, other competitors and designers, right? Taste, that's it again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. And I think we are seeing a lot of language and a lot of talking points around that, like design process is dead and we no longer do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's ironic because like there is no such thing as no process. There is always a
Right.
process. Your no process is a process in itself, right? Like what I just described, where you just start building your ideas immediately and you get the working prototypes into people's hands using live data. That in itself is a design process.
Yeah.
And there are pros and cons to it. I can like name a bunch of disadvantages that you would have from using something like that. It's not always the best way. Now, of course, it's opened up different pathways because the cost of building has changed dramatically compared to past years. But anyway, that's one definition, right? You're designing things in a different way that a designer from say 3 or 4 years ago would not be able to do in the same way. So you can say that's AI native. And I think that's what most designers mean when they talk about AI native. The other definition is using agents and just shortcutting a lot of the busy work that happens.
Yeah.
So you're basically creating some kind of a super overlap role within the company where there's no longer a three-legged stool of design, engineering, and product management, but you're now able to do everything, or you're able to create alignment across everyone, including this leadership. And I think that's another where the way people are defining it. I'm sure there are more, and to be honest, I don't really care because it's just again, it's a marketing terminology at this point
Right.
for people to insinuate that they are part of the in group and other people are not. Like you have to realize that a lot of these terminology in marketing, in hype especially, is about positioning yourself versus your
Mm-hmm.
competitor. And I think given the mass layoffs and just how competitive the job market is, designers feel the need to denigrate others in order to uplift themselves in the eyes of the powers that be. And I think that's super unfortunate because I do think there's a human aspect to design that
Yeah.
we should lean into a little bit more. And yeah, it's all part of showcasing how we are better than others. We're more valuable. And I don't think that's always the best way to build teams or to work with others.
So if this is, and I've seen a lot of the same type of talk and same type of posts. There was one that you highlighted yesterday or the day before on what you were talking about, which is the
Yeah.
kind
I'm
of
listening. I'm just gonna grab my
posturing,
dog. So keep
uh,
talking.
the, the posturing of who is doing design AI first or AI native and who is not and what's going to happen. And people are scared to lose their jobs or people aren't going to lose their jobs, going to reskill. All that is narrative and editorialization on top of the day to day. And so, where you were talking about the hype part of cutting out the shortcuts, collapsing the process, down into something that doesn't require mock-ups and iterations and wireframes and a couple of weeks of testing going out, but you can build things and create things. What's the underneath the hype, the pivot though of that functional reality that let's say there is somebody who has good first principles, they understand human-centered design, they're doing, good customer research, understanding product market fit, they have their jobs to be done, playbook, whatever, and they are then also using these tools. Is this something that can be reversed? Can design work with, like, let's call it like Figma, and let's say without AI in an organization, and then other teams are using it within the organization? And like, what do you do with the practical application where, when you said that you said the words, I don't use Figma anymore. I didn't know if you meant you or if you were like quoting like the faceless type of designer out in the world, but I will say I don't, and I'm not even using like IDEs other than to spot check things. Like I opened up um, Cursor, I tried out, I mean, Lovable and like like hosted stuff, Subframe, Magic Patterns, and I just was like, I don't really need to do any of this. And so now it's like terminals, 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 and Firefox. And so, like, what happens when you get rid of the hype and it's just like somebody does show up and build something with Claude Code or Codex or Gemini CLI, and it is researched and designed, and it's like
Yeah.
it ends up in the browser. Who cares where it came from?
Yeah, I look, there's no doubt that there are practical applications for AI tooling in most things out there.
Hmm.
I don't think it's so valuable or it's integrated so well right now that it can replace jobs, for example. Um,
Okay, that's
but
a good distinction.
but there are like I can build stuff now. Like there's value in that, right? Like I'm building a browser plugin for H1B visas right now. So that
Mm,
when you're on LinkedIn, you can see, oh, I want to apply to this company. Do they sponsor H1B visas? Previously, you would need
smart.
to download this big document from the US government and they have entity names that you're registered legally under,
Hmm.
which is not the actual name of the brand name of the company, like Amazon, right? Amazon has like 33 subsidiaries that are, you know, registered with the US government, Amazon Web Services LLC, Amazon Groceries LLC, etc.
I love
And
groceries.
sure, right? So I use AI to clean up that data and to
Yeah.
link it. And that would have taken me probably many months to do if I were to do it manually. And I did it in like 30 minutes, right?
Well,
So
I'm going to ask about that specific thing. It would have taken me many months to do it manually. Would you have done it at all?
no, obviously I would be like, no, that's not what I how I would want to spend my time, right? So there's practical applications in it, and I think that the part that like really frustrates me when I talk to many other designers is that people fixate on specific examples of how AI is helping them and creating value for them, and I
Hmm.
respect that, I agree with that, but I do think there are bigger and greater systems at play here
Hmm.
that can create issues, and I don't think people are able to differentiate that or to compartmentalize. Well, sorry, they compartmentalize it a little bit too well in this case.
Mm.
So, what I often say is AI is very good for me individually, like it's creating more
Yeah.
value for me at an individual microscopic level. But on a systematic level, I can see this making my life much worse down the line, if not already. And I think that's something that we need to be really cognizant of, right? Like another example I can give is like the gig economy.
Yep.
And I think many people who argue for the gig economy will say that you're creating job opportunities for people. Now they can make money while they're driving Uber. Previously, they would need to go out and look for a job and then go through the whole process of job applications, interviews, and getting onboarded, etc. And then you're making like maybe $10 an hour minimum wage. But now you can just sign up for Uber and drive this afternoon or tomorrow, right?
Right.
So on the surface, that
Provided you
sounds
don't do the math and realize you're making negative money.
potentially. I mean, I wouldn't say gig economy is making you negative money, right? Like it's definitely making you money in some way, shape, or form. But if you look at the greater ecosystem of, say, healthcare, health benefits, and also how much this is costing you in terms of potential income elsewhere, and
Hmm.
how you're forced to do this kind of work in order to survive, I think people might see it differently. But most people don't really see it that way. And I do think designers who often have to look at things at a systematic level really should be able to see this. And unfortunately, many cannot or refuse to, or just have bought in so hard that they've drunk in the Kool-Aid, and they
Mm.
just repeat the same pattern of why this is so fucking awesome for them, when from a statistical standpoint, from like logic or data wise, it's really not that great for them. Like at some point, look, we don't know what's really going to happen, right? Like, is there actually AGI or not? I'm not going to argue that because I'm not an expert. There are much smarter
Hmm.
people than I am, like Oveta Sampson and people who actually work in this space who have legitimate opinions about whether or not AGI is possible or not, who may not have a vested interest in making this happen because
Yeah.
the VCs and the founders will always say this is going to happen next 6 months, and they need to keep selling this hype in order to get funding, to get raises, etc. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think the separation of what's a replaceable job and what's not a replaceable job by AI is going to be right below us. Like it's not going to separate bad designers from good designers, right?
Right.
Like if we were to look at the skill spectrum of a barely employable senior designer who's going to struggle to get a job versus the top designers in the field right now who are landing $300,000 to $500,000 a year jobs at the
Right.
hottest tech companies. The
Yeah.
skill difference between them is, to most designers, pretty massive. It's like I would need to spend years to get to that level, if ever. Maybe I just don't have the DNA or the know-how to get there ever, right? Now, think about that skill gap between them. You might think it's massive, but I would argue that the skill difference between the worst employable designer versus where AI is in terms of design skill set of being able to replace a designer is pretty massive,
Mm.
right?
So let
Like
me go ahead.
so what I'm trying to say is right now AI is not able to replace the worst designer, but if it ever gets close to there, that like separation between the best and worst designer is really minuscule in terms of AI capabilities. So it's either going to
Well,
never reach the worst designer or it's going to overlap most, if
hmm.
not all, designers. So from a systematic level, I think this is technically a really bad thing for designers.
Ooh. Let me combine a couple comments together. Starting with what you're saying, that it can be beneficial individually and not on a broad scale. That sounds, like a specific application of, privatize the gains, publicize whatever the losses, right? Tragedy of the commons of design, where an individual might be able to accelerate up quickly, but short-term gain results in a long-term loss. So with that idea as like the base, I'm going to combine what you call the skill gap and taste with something from the start, which was about what are designers targeting right now, or could they be, or should they be, as their outcome? Because you said to build something that works, or to build what something looks like, and how does that fit in with the skill gap and what people are being, let's say, paid for, compensated to deliver? And then where does the inventor persona and the people who, what they do is take an idea and bring the idea into the world to either be testable or experienceable? And that could be a designer, that could just be a startup founder, it could just be a person. But it sounds like we don't actually know what designers outcome is now, where you ask two people with equal, let's call it, innate skill or experience, and one produces a clickable Figma prototype spec or a Framer prototype, and one produces the same product that is a functioning database connected API enabled product in the browser. Like, what does that do to what the expectations are of designers who take a pain point and a problem statement and produce a solution and deliver it
Hmm.
to customers?
Great question. I think, fuck, I hate saying it depends, but like we have to remember that the way we operate as designers within companies is very culturally based. What the
Yeah.
company, how the company functions, what the company expects from you, and how they currently operate. So the analogy I always use is, designers typically have pretty big egos, and we
Mm.
see ourselves as like top of the line engine, like say a McLaren engine, and we are if in the right car, we can go really fast, we can do really damn good work, we create a lot of value for shareholders and businesses, whatever. But most companies are not McLaren cars. They're probably like run-of-the-mill Volkswagen Beetles
Right.
or the Jetta,
Or the
just a
Homer.
the yeah, no, they're like Toyota Camrys, right? And they're looking for a really specific type of designer that's maybe a little more common, perhaps.
Mm,
And I'm not saying like any common average designer is the right fit, but I think designers who are hireable currently fit within a really specific mold. And
I agree with that. Yeah.
I think when we talk about like what can you do as a designer, you could do a lot. It's just that the way you do it and the way you build it, the question is, will that actually work with the company you're currently in? And would the company that is currently hiring or interviewing you find that valuable? And I think one good thing about AI becoming really popular is it's in a way resetting certain things or resetting certain expectations.
Ooh, I like that.
So, I mean, it's not all bad things, right? So, we're now more open than ever to talk about what are the roles and responsibilities of designers versus
Hmm.
PMs versus engineers. And when there's a reset, I think people smell blood in the water and they start to try to grab territory. And unfortunately, like one really annoying thing I often see on LinkedIn is like, you know, whatever role this person belongs in, they will loudly proclaim that now their role can do everything else. Fuck everybody else. My role is better than yours because I can do all these things with AI. And it's it's weird. It's just like I don't want to say it's class warfare, but there's very much like think about like who actually owns AI, like who actually benefits the most from its usage. It's not really you or me. I think we are led to believe that yes, there are short-term gains for us to use this tool. Similar to if you were desperate for money to pay your bills, pay your rent tomorrow, you might say,
Hmm.
I'm gonna drive for Uber tonight, make like quick $200, make rent, make my credit card bills, and that's a win, right? That's better than the alternative. And really, it's like who's really gaining the most from that? It's the house. It's not
Right.
you who's pulling a 12-hour day or like overnight work, driving people around and delivering food.
Right. Yeah. There is, there, I mean, it's an unavoidable overarching uh, societal situation we all, you know, face. I wrote this in the comment yesterday about um, a lot of the world, thank God, exists outside of America, but all the FANG companies and the major AI players and you and me are in this country. And so there's the shadow cast over what we're doing, which is not the topic of this podcast, but specifically with design and designers and people who want to continue to do um, what they did, which was create things with technology that they hope help people who use it. And be it for, I mean, right now I work on medical devices, and um, before that, I mean, working at Mural, it was like I was helping mostly like designers and like facilitators like do their work through virtual whiteboards. Before that, QuickBooks, most of the QuickBooks customers were small businesses with 5 or less employees. They were landscapers, they were your hairdresser. They were most of those Uber drivers who were using it to save money by recording their income. So what is the mandate of designers if tooling is changing, if AI is becoming a substrate and a secondary economy and a secondary, let's call it like internet, where using AI and better products, but AI processes are now a, maybe let's call it for a while, separate and parallel type of track. Where do you see let's call it the spiritual focus and like the energetic focus of being someone who wants to remain a designer while this is happening going. And if we're to like give advice and not just talk like societal impact, what do you tell the senior designer with 7 years experience that maybe their entire career has been using Sketch and Figma in a time where they didn't code at all? Because I remember when you could code and you could kind of write HTML and CSS. And then even, well, I was into it. I just kind of gave it up because it all switched to doing everything in like consolidated JavaScript like languages like React. And I'm like, I don't want to have to learn to do that. Now I can't actually edit this stuff. I'll just forget about it. And so, what does the person who wants to be a designer do now besides the personal projects and the prototypes and the experiments to stay relevant? Because I'm not going to push back on anybody. I don't think that's productive, but I'll just bring up like people do need to pay those bills. And if
Yeah.
this is your trade and your skill, like what should people be doing? What are you doing? What should I be doing with regards to, we still work within an industry with a subject matter expertise that is broadly applicable. What do we do?
Look, I would never tell an Uber driver that they shouldn't be driving for Uber because it's bad for the greater system because, they have real bills to pay. And that's not my fucking business to tell people what to do. I
Yeah.
do think that the reason why I talk about this isn't because I have such a dim or dark or pessimistic view on AI at all. It's quite the opposite. I just feel that there is a lot of hype and money, marketing money, that are being funneled toward ads, content creators similar to me, to talk about this resplendent future that doesn't really
Mm,
exist or might not exist in order to sell their products. And I think a lot of content creators, LinkedIn, everywhere else, undersell how much they're changing the way we evaluate designers and how we do design hiring because they have a massive impact on it. They just maybe don't realize it or they refuse to admit it. But the way we evaluate, like when we look at somebody's portfolio or we look at somebody's experience, we immediately can clock,
right.
is that person a good designer or not a good designer? By good, I mean, is that person hireable, right? And and I think a lot of that is instinctual. It's based on hype. It's based on marketing. And I think design tooling, AI design tooling, or AI tooling itself has a really big impact on that. And I can give really specific examples of like, just how much we talk about AI first or AI native when it comes to
Hmm.
hiring, even though we have not fucking defined it at all.
I think,
So, but anyway, to answer your question, it's
yeah.
like, uh, one, not my business. You do what you have to do. You figure out where your moralities lie, like where your lines are. Like I kind of know where my lines are, and I
Hmm.
try not to cross that in order to make a living. And I try not to judge other people too hard for the decisions that they make. I do think that it's important to talk about this area of like how do you look at it from a systematic level, because I think very few people do, or when they do, they don't talk about it. So the only acceptable conversation people are having right now is around AI native hiring. Really, it's like you get with the system, you do these things in order to get hired to be a better designer, and we've aligned that. Like right now, the connotation is if you don't use AI tooling, you are not hireable. You are an old crusty dinosaur of a designer. Like maybe that sounds really extreme, but that is the underlying connotation that a lot of the messaging you see on LinkedIn
Is there,
is
is there,
espousing.
is that, I am not exposed to what's going on in hiring, but um, is that what the hype is saying, or do you think that that is what's actually going on in the interviews and the screeners, that
Yeah.
not a recruiter, but like a screener who asks you, do you have 5 years of experience with Figma Make? like, are they actually asking for AI first, or are we being told they are? Because as a part of the greater narrative to try to, like I was just talking this morning or yesterday about how taste, I think, is post hoc rationalizations. It's not a real thing. It's a thing we attribute to something that we observe. And so are the hype masters trying to create the idea that we're hiring for AI native, AI first, trying to create an artificial sense of demand in the same way that Coke killed Crystal Pepsi by introducing Clear Diet Tab as a bad cola to tank the clear cola market. That's a true story. Are people trying to tank the like non-AI market by creating a zeitgeist that isn't necessarily real, but it's becoming true?
Yeah, I don't think I'm able to really think about that on a 4D chess level to really
5D
say 5D, 4, whatever. What's the fourth dimension? Time?
time,
Five
yeah.
would be,
I don't
I
know.
don't even know what five is. But I do think to some extent it is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
And the most common interview question that we're seeing nowadays is how are you using AI in your workflow? And it's a it's an interesting question because it's purposefully open-ended and also it's non-judgmental because if you're a candidate and you reverse that question and you ask it back to the company more often than not, you're going to get a really unsatisfying answer of
I
how this
wouldn't
company,
expect they even know what an answer looks like. I
sure.
mean, if somebody asked, how are you using AI in your workflow? That person, I would say, is fishing to try to retcon the question as if they know. Because I think that is another red herring of how are you how are you using AI in your workflow? And as they sit and scribble down notes because they have no idea what to do either.
I mean, some, yes, but I obviously there are companies that are fairly more mature and advanced in using AI tooling and AI processes. And in those cases, they want to make sure that you're at least philosophically aligned with them, that you're
Mm,
able to get with the flow and to upskill in this area and you're willing to do this kind of work. You're not some Luddite who refuses to pick up any AI tooling at all, right?
right.
And I do think that at the end of the day, design hire, and I say this quite often, is very much culturally based
Yeah.
as opposed to logic based. So, and it's always been this way. It's not like even though years ago when we were using, you know, rubrics for hiring, that it wasn't based on instinct or just vibes. It's always been like that. But I think nowadays we're we're proud of it. Whereas in the past, it's like something that is happening, but we're trying. We're a little bit ashamed of it, and we're trying to not be, um, be a little bit more database or decision, data driven decisions making. Nowadays, it's just like, yeah, this is how we do things. This is great.
Yeah.
This is the best way.
I,
And I think we're missing out on certain things as a
I
result.
agree with that. And that I don't want to go into this other than to note it that I do agree that design has become very much a um, we want to hire people we like, and we come up with reasons to not have to say that. But the whatever you would call like higher order design that you would learn in conference talks and workshops about methods and whatever, I haven't seen that for so long. I don't even remember the last time I really saw somebody. I mean, to this day, I still teach people how to do like a basic like problem statement or even start with a use case. Or do you even have an idea of a customer or archetype? And they're like, we don't do that. I've been just churning and burning on creating designs and iterations and concepts. That's also that a separate topic. I've never heard such a focus on AI won't let you create 50 artboards of the same design to evaluate. And I'm like, good. That was such a waste of time. We're at 44 minutes. I want to talk about jobs. I want to talk about you and your job because
Yeah.
I'm a fan. I'm not one of your only fans, but I know you had been looking into starting an OnlyFans as a part of your job hunt. And so I'm just wondering, you don't have to talk about what you're doing because I know you are a real person. And for everybody who's getting uncomfortable, I know outside of work, but where do you see you going with career? Because I know that the OnlyFans thing, that was like, I looked at our text. We were talking about that in like September. It's almost like
Yeah.
April. Where do you see yourself going? Because I mean, you started it and the world changed out from under you. Like, where do you want to end up? Like, where do you see you applying skills? Like, what does it look like from you as an individual with regards to getting a job or finding a job or working
Yeah.
somewhere?
Okay. This is a big question. I'm Let me think about this. I'm just gonna talk it out, really.
Talk it out. Do it.
First, I want to like acknowledge like all the comments people are writing in
Oh
here,
yeah.
like with Louise and Dennis and Allison. I hear a lot of frustration. I would say like that's to put it lightly, and I feel the same way. I I think what really gets my goat at times is when people say I'm being cynical or pessimistic. And I'm sure folks who see things similarly have heard the same things. And that's like typically an argument I would get into with Tommy, who is very anti pessimism. And I, that's like a whole topic in itself. But I want to just acknowledge it for a second. I just want to say that there are a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, it's like we don't really have a ton of choices, and we kind of have to make these tough choices and keep going. And that's unfortunate. It's actually a little bit painful. I think there is the
Mm,
idea of moral injury for designers now
yeah.
more so than ever, especially the more creative designers, which I don't even consider myself a part of. The ones who are creating real art, who are really creating
Yeah.
original things, who would find a lot of issues with how AI is being used in that regard. So that's one thing. The other thing is, OnlyFans. So I started that back in September. I
Yep.
had set myself a goal of getting a job in 6 months, and a lot has changed. So first of all, I want to acknowledge I completely failed that. Like I did not meet the deadline, and I've had to process a lot of like really complex ideas or thoughts around this. I mean, I'm not saying these ideas are like high level complexity. It's just that there are contradictions that I'm trying to process as I evaluate all this stuff.
Hmm.
So, why did it fail? The goal is fairly aggressive. It's like I would spend 3 or 4 months upskilling, 1 month interviewing and negotiating, etc. I've done it in the past in terms of being really aggressive with a job hunt and getting pretty good results from it. So I know I could do it. I think the difference this time around is that while I have a pretty good perception or idea of how design hiring is done, what people are looking for, I do think a lot has changed in the last several months where design hiring is no longer the same in weird ways. And while I caught it only Fangs were not my target. Like I don't think I would
Right.
want it to go to Amazon or Meta, for example. I'm actually I call it only Fangs because Fangs is oftentimes like it's kind of like tongue in cheek joke. Like all designers want to work at a Fang because they
Hmm.
paid the most at a certain point. And I think that's very much a 5-year-old um, assumption. I'm playing a joke off, right?
Hmm.
So what I really wanted to do was probably a smaller stage startup that was growing really quickly, most likely
Mm.
in the AI space. And that's kind of like one contradiction that I'm dealing with, which is would I want to work at Anthropic? Yes. Do I find it a bit problematic that they are accused of basically intaking? I'm not going to, we can say stealing a ton of copyrighted material
Hmm.
by authors, artists. in order to build their large language models. And then they turn around and they're complaining about other smaller model makers who are now ingesting their information and data in order to leverage and build their own
Yeah.
models. So there's a lot of contradiction there, or hypocrisy.
Mm.
And if I'm trying to get a job there, then what do I really need to do? Okay, so it has to be AI focused stuff. Now, one thing that I've been really critical of, mostly privately, because I don't really want to say this too publicly because
Uh-oh. You heard it
it's
here, folks.
the design content creator space is actually very small. There are
Yep.
maybe only a few dozens of design content creators who who are on LinkedIn, because I don't use X, I don't use Instagram or YouTube really.
Me neither.
And it makes a lot of sense for you to at least be cordial with them. Like that's important. They're in a way they're your coworkers, because it's a very lonely or isolating job because there's very little information out. Like how much do I charge for sponsorships or partnerships? I have no fucking clue, because it's not like if you talk to me about how much should I ask as a senior designer at JPMC or Bloomberg or wherever else, I can go super deep with you about how much should you be asking for, how should you negotiate this a job offer or your raises, etc. But when it comes to partnerships or sponsorships, I have no clue, because it's such a new space. It's growing really quickly, but it's really new, and we rely on each other in order to make good decisions or business decisions in this case. But at the same time, it's like content creators are very much part of the problem, because there are very few channels for
Mm-hmm.
design tooling to get their word out to market to designers,
Yeah, that's a good point.
right? Like you can't really market over newspaper or Facebook. It doesn't really work. It like in order for you to get really focused impressions and reach with your core audience of users and customers, design content creators is probably the best way to spend your dollar. So the way it's working is that AI tooling or design tooling in general had the most budget, because if Figma gets into a bigger company, they could be charging $100,000 per
Yeah.
year for their licenses, right? So all that money that's going to design content creation is, in a way, design content creators leveraging their reach, their audience to shape how we evaluate other designers. And
Being
do I
influenced by who's paying them to market their stuff, right?
Yes, and I think like if you talk to a design content creator, they'll deny it. They don't, and I don't think they're lying. I think they just don't think that they have that kind of impact. But they're all part of it, right? Like it's really a marketing machine at the end of the day. It's not like one like you wouldn't pin it on one single design content creator. It's like all of them. Like Figma has a stable of content creators they work with, and when they have a campaign they put out, they would be putting money, or they would
Yeah.
be having each of these content creators put out a single message, right? Or a singular message in many cases. So it's one thing to create content around that. And I've done it. I've partnered with a few AI design tooling companies to create posts. And I've been very clear in how I do it, which is
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make something really cool with this tool and show people that you can do this. This is the level of detail level of polish and detail you can create with this tool. And they can make their own decisions based on their own judgments, based on what they see from me. And hopefully that is good enough for people to say, wow, that's really cool. You made that with Figma Make. Maybe I should give this tool a try. I'm comfortable with that kind of level of messaging. What I don't feel comfortable with is to say, all right, I'm going to spend 12 hours per day using AI tooling. You can watch me. And now I'm going to get a job that pays me $300,000 or $400,000 per year as base salary working at these companies. And I think that messaging is a little bit way too potent. Like
Mm.
and I'm not saying like I am the most effective content creator out there, or like I'm the best shill or the best marketer. It's just that I don't know if I want to create that kind of messaging. I think that is pretty problematic. And it's in a way saying if you want to get a design job in a really bad job market where there's a lot of vulnerability and people who are really who are looking for answers, who are asking the same fucking questions day after day. Where do I learn about AI tooling? Which courses do I pay money for? And how do I land a job? Because I have no fucking clue right now because it's so confusing. And for me to like output that kind of messaging, that's I'm not sure I'm okay with that. So here's the rub, right?
Hmm.
If I want a job and this is where I want my career to go, and I think that's a private thing. Like I don't think it's fair for other people to judge me on
Yeah.
how I want to make my money or how I want my design career to go
Hmm.
in many ways. I don't really judge other people. Like I'm not gonna like shit on somebody for working at Open AI because they deal with the Pentagon. Like if they're gonna pay you half a mil or $1 million a year
Jeez.
to do this work, congrats. Like if you're able to deal with that and live with that, that's great. I'm not here to judge people. I think people have done far worse things for less money. Uh, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not to me again, that's a private thing. So I want to be able to do that, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable
I know.
making a meal out of it and telling people like this is how you do it. So
So
originally, sorry, I'm gonna go one for a little bit longer.
keep going.
Originally, I had worked out a deal with a non AI tooling company to create content for OnlyFans and to
Yep.
like highlight how I'm using their tool to land a job. And some way along the way, I was like, okay, that's still an effective way. But if I want this job, I need to use this other tool. I need to
Right.
do this other thing. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable with highlighting it because it's just there are issues there. Like, again, this is great for me individually to do this
Yeah.
thing, but really bad for the wider system for me to say, this is the best way to make money as a designer. So everybody else should do it the same way. Like, it's again a self fulfilling prophecy.
I so you said something that I triggered a new idea. I haven't really talked about heard talked about a lot because I think most of the stuff like on LinkedIn is pretty. It's pretty. I think it's a narrative being pushed, and it's not very true, and it's not very realistic. And I know that you and I have like basically the same type of overlapping big picture opinion and don't believe a lot of it. So I want to talk about something that's not the hype. And I don't even know if you noticed what you said, but you were talking about working at OpenAI and you were talking about spending 12 hours learning a specific tool to start to be hired. And all of a sudden I had my two remaining neurons connect and say, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. We're talking about having designers learn a new tool to get hired. What happens to all the stuff that isn't dependent on a tool, like knowing how to do a journey map or a service blueprint or write a persona or just knowing how to use multiple different
Sure.
tools or pivot towards environments? You know what I mean? That was the first half of that question, which is wait a second, you learn magic patterns overnight. That's 5% of what you need as a designer. Are we still hiring for anybody who's read like the elements of user experience or inmates running the asylum or any, do people even read anymore? But then the second thing, this is where the question came from. You talked about working for a lot of money, way more money than I make at OpenAI as these designers. So now it's like, what are they doing at OpenAI where you can get paid that type of money, whether or not it's producing that value? I'm not talking about the amount of money, but I'm saying, wait, what is a designer at OpenAI or Anthropic? We saw the video from Jenny Wynn, right? About the design process is dead. What are these designers doing at OpenAI though? They're learning a tool, they're learning the flavor of the month skill, which is going to be out of date in a month anyways. But then they're also going to work as a designer at these big blue chip AI companies. I've used ChatGPT, I've used Gemini, I've used all of them. This is like the work of this isn't what am I trying to say here? What are they designing? What are they doing? And what are these jobs that they're getting hired for paying this much to produce what and with what?
Yeah. One thing I want to really caution everyone is that when we talk about these abstract concepts of AI tooling and service design skills, etc., we tend to simplify it dramatically, and we tend to take a black and white thinking around it, um, either or, as in somebody who is really good at service design cannot possibly be good at visual design, and vice versa.
Mm,
And it's quite frustrating because when I hear like the design process is dead, the arguments that are for that messaging typically focuses on like a hypothetical designer or a designer archetype that we all have in our heads, which is a designer who is so focused on the design process, who is so stubborn and hard coded to it that they refuse to create visuals or to go out on a limb and experiment. Instead, they have to do the user research. They have to do the card sorting, the persona,
yeah.
documentation. And and while I'm sure there's designers out there who might be like that, I really haven't seen that. Like, I wouldn't say that is the core issue here. Like, you're taking the worst person of an example to make your point, and I think that takes a lot away from it. It's like it's the same, argument we hear from our administration. Sorry to, go back into this, is to say to show examples of immigrants who commit extremely violent crimes
Hmm.
and say, "Oh, look at this! Like this illegal immigrant did all these nasty, horrible things. Now we need to crack down on that, right?" Like, yes, there are immigrants who commit crimes. Like, there are people who commit crimes, but that's not. But if you look at the wider, statistics, you realize that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than residents or legal residents of a company or whatnot.
Hmm.
So, what does this all mean? Well, there are multiple layers to it. I would say, on one hand, there are very few service design roles available in the United States. They're more common in Europe, but service blueprinting, that seems to have gone and went on its way. It's no longer the core skill set that people are hiring for. And again, this goes back to design hiring is cultural. There was a point in time when culturally that had more impact than it does today. So AI hiring or hiring around AI skills is more important now than service design skills by far. But at the same time, it's not like the designers who are working at OpenAI and elsewhere and Anthropic don't have a service design background or aren't able to do it. Um, Jenny Wen, who like I find issues with, I disagree with a lot of things she says in her talk, and that talk went really, really far. Like, as in, it's extremely popular talk. I will never
Yeah.
be able to create a talk that's as popular, that has such a resonating message as her. And I would also argue that had she not been working at Anthropic and she didn't have her pedigree, I think people would be arguing against that and poking holes in it way more than what they do now, which is they just accept it without question oftentimes. It
Yeah.
goes in line with their own biases already and their own opinions and whatnot. And all that is to say, also to mention that Jenny Wen is actually, not actually, like Jenny Wen is legitimately one of the most talented designers out there. And there's no fucking way that somebody like her could create FigJam without having a really strong service background. I personally think FigJam is better than Mural and also Mural. Sorry.
Hmm.
And I think it's really hard to create a tool that is considerably better than incumbents in the space. Typically,
Hmm.
when you see a company emulate or copy another tool out there and make their own versions of it, it could be a little bit better in certain areas, but on a whole, it's not as good, or it's not doesn't have the new factors to make it, to differentiate it, to make it better. It's always like a weak imitation of it with a few core features, a few bells and whistles that make it a little bit better. I would say Fig Jam is noticeably better, in my opinion, for designers especially. And
Mm,
I'm pretty sure she was in charge of that. So she's a
yep.
really talented designer who, I disagree with on certain
Well,
things, but yeah,
I can't tell if that forks the conversation into what we talked about before, which is taste making is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that if popular people start to promote a certain approach, that becomes the approach. And if you get prominent people with large followings saying, this is how I do it, this is what we need to do, it becomes kind of like the Appleification of design, assuming that what we saw, I'm going to say, like in the 2010s, 20 teens, when Apple um, was doing a lot of stuff kind of like pre-COVID. One of my best friends and engineering partners has worked there for now, I mean, 9 or 10 years. They're from Utah, and I interviewed Apple internally to work on the internal iTunes and like the music and the media store team, the TV shows, all that. And I started asking, and I was like, "Oh, tell me about design culture," and I started rattling off all of the stuff I was learning at Intuit about design for delight, and we're going to innovation catalysts, and we have every whatever. And he just looked at me and said, "We don't do any of that." I'm like, what? I'm like, I thought you had all the like first order principles of design. He said, no, we don't do any of that. You're embedded with an engineer, you do what they want, and we produce stuff according to the guidelines and the central, Apple HDI, like whatever. But no, we don't. There's no design culture here. And it's engineering and product culture, but what you're talking about, you're not going to find here. It sounds like you would hate to be a designer here. And I was blown away because I made the assumption that culturally the stuff I saw on the TV commercials and what I saw at the Apple store and all this awesome stuff, I love Apple stuff, would have come from the same type of like dyed in the wool design thinking, human centered
yeah.
design. And I was just told, you are not going to find that here. This is probably 2016 at a taco shop in Cupertino. And I just was like, oh, wow, I guess my Apple dream is gone. And so now, like, when we're talking about taste making and what the skills people should learn, we should be learning. You've said a few times that the skills are AI skills. AI is a technology. What are the like design skills you think should go with AI? Are we leaning more back into hands-on field customer research, product market fit? Are we talking people should be getting out there like blue ocean, like market analysis, or are designers truly just pivoted from being like pixel pushers to being code monkeys? Because like AI is a modality of executing design. What are the design skills that are not about
Yeah.
using the AI that are still relevant? Or are we another dark age where it's like there aren't any? You just need to know how to prompt.
You said a lot, and I want to say
Okay,
that
sorry.
first of all, like it's so funny because like if you should get Bob Baxley to talk about Apple because
Okay, I'm gonna write that
your
down.
opinions on Apple are cannot be more different. And I'm sure it has a lot to do with which team you're on. That typically has a big effect on larger companies like
Mm-hmm.
Apple.
Oh, I
So
believe it.
yeah, I think Bob's interpretation of Apple is very, very different than yours. Um, in terms of skill set, I think great question. I am not the right person to answer that, and I don't think most people are the right people to answer that because I think AI as a tool is is still so nascent and underdeveloped
Mm-hmm.
that we're all applying our own idiosyncrasies to this tool. And the tooling that we're seeing right now is
Oh,
designed not for individuals, it's not designed for designers really. It's designed based on the technology's limitations. And we're doing a really poor job of bridging that chasm between what the technology is able to
yeah,
do
yeah.
versus what people actually need it to do in order to derive any value out of it. And we're walking this very thin tightrope in order to make it happen. So I can describe like what works for me. I think um, I we go back to that example where every designer thinks they're a McLaren engine. Like I think
Yeah.
I'm special
Hmm.
and I do things a little bit differently. I My unique value proposition as a designer is different than other most other designers, I assume, because again, it's unique. And one example I can give is when I want to build something in an AI tool, I don't really create a complex prompt document or PRD. I see that like Steve Whitmer, who showed me all this stuff that he does. Like he goes into OpenAI, sorry, ChatGPT first to create the PRD, then he feeds it into Magic Patterns, and he basically like shortcuts a lot of the thinking work that goes into it in order to create a compelling example or use case or design. And for
Hmm.
me, it's like I've mapped out exactly what I want to make in my head, and I'm just feeding in really specific prompts over and over again. So I don't have to wait too long. And I just say adjust this, add this little
Hmm.
feature, and then after enough building blocks, it becomes a fully fleshed out feature. So I'm basically using the waterfall method to build things in AI because agile in my mind doesn't really make sense anymore because when I try to use it in the agile methodology, like what I get out of the AI tool is so like out of whack with what I wanted to build that it's much better for me to have minute control over each individual prompt I send in. So an example I can give is for the H-1B visa thing, I build a database first because I
Hmm.
already know what the end tool is going to look like, what it does. It's all in my head. So I built a database first. I didn't like if you were to do it in the agile method, you would probably spin up a kind of like a dummy database with fake data, perhaps, or like simplified columns, and then you would connect everything together to make sure it works before you start adding in real data. And for me, it's like a waterfall method. It's like, okay, I have the big database. Now let me clean it up. Let me make sure that it maps to LinkedIn's
Hmm.
marketing name for each of these companies, etc. And then I'm going to build the infrastructure on top of it, bit by bit by bit. And then at the end is like everything comes together. It's kind of like Japanese woodworking, where you're just like finally everything slides into place at the end, and that's how I
Hmm.
like to build. And I don't recommend that to most other designers because that's maybe not how you think about things. It's not like my way is superior. It's just like how I build it. So I have a really specific way of building with AI, and I think it's a little bit comical how people are telling others this is how you use a really low tech, wide open range tool based on how they think, how they abstract concepts, and expect other people to build it the same way. It's like we're all very different people. Why would you do
Yeah.
that?
I, I think this is a really kind of fresh or underspoken articulation of what AI can and is, which is it's much more of um, a augment to the personal approach to people that they can use as they see fit, but it doesn't necessarily dictate. Like one of the buzzwords everyone likes to use to sound smart is deterministic versus probabilistic when talking about design. And it
Yeah.
sounds like using AI isn't deterministic in what you're using it for or how you're using it for, but you might find a way to use it in the way that you are as a designer or in your role or in your expectations without necessarily letting it dictate upstream what you should be doing, which I agree with. I think is smart. We're like at an hour and 15 minutes, and there's still 34 people watching. If we're going to talk about one last thing and we want to like are we anti-pessimistic? Or we no, we don't want to be anti-pessimistic. We want to be pessimistic. What's your advice, or what would you say that designers, people who trust you or just want to do something proactive can go and do or learn or study? I mean, and I hope
Mhm.
that we can tell people something more than like go and pick up the tool that just released yesterday, Google Scratch 2.0 or whatever. But that's going to be replaced by pencil tomorrow and that's going to be replaced by ballpoint pen the next day. Like, what would you say is like your advice to someone with a ton
Mhm.
of followers and influence? I mean, I watch the way Trevor Nielsen follows you everywhere like a little puppy dog. What do you say for designers like that who are just struggling and need someone like you to tell them what to do? And then for everyone else besides Trevor.
First, you need to go to Trevor's profile and you need to write a
Okay,
mean comment.
okay, perfect.
One of his most recent posts. Like the meaner, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, want to focus on how he looks.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like just how white bread he is,
Yeah.
and just make fun of him. Just like his career. I think that's always like a really good target. Like how he's accomplished so little as a
Right.
freelancer, whatever that means. But
Whatever that means.
so that's the first step. You need to
Perfect.
mock him, make him feel worse about himself. And then after that, okay, so the problem with advice around AI is that there's so many aspects to it. Like you really need to define what do you mean by AI tooling? Like, are you
Mm-hmm.
talking about trying to get a job? Are you trying to just educate yourself so you feel more prepared for the future? Are you talking about, if you're a design manager or design leader within your company, how do you get everybody, prepare people for the future? How do you navigate all this? Like, there's just so many different aspects to it, so many areas that it's really hard to define. Like, what do you mean by AI? AI is just, it's everywhere right now in some ways. And I think in most cases, people are talking about jobs. Like, how do I get a job?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make sure my career doesn't fall off a cliff at a certain point? And I think, what do I feel comfortable saying? I would say if you need a job right now, you need to first of all define where you want to be at and also where you can be at, right? Because there's a Venn diagram of like where you would like to go and where you can actually go right now if you need money right away.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to define what that is and make some hard decisions around that. And then once you do make that decision, you can do a lot more research around how do they hire for people. And you need to recognize that design hiring is again cultural. So you need to understand that culture. And I think too oftentimes designers impose their own cultural beliefs onto another company, which doesn't make sense. It's like me going to Japan and saying, I don't like the way you do certain things because in my own home country, we do it this way and our way is better. Maybe it is better, but that's not how you win friends and influence people, right? Like this is how you
Okay.
get a job. So you do need to be cognizant of other people's culture and other companies' culture and their hiring culture, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So once you research that and figure things out, you can then figure out how do you want to approach your upskilling, what kind of tools do you need to use, how do you speak the language so that you're culturally aligned and also narratively aligned, right? So like an example would be you describe all of these things about what you did at Intuit, and the Apple person was like, that's not how we do things, you're out. And
Mm-hmm.
if you really wanted an Apple job, you would have done the research to understand this is how the Apple movies and media department did things so that you can be culturally aligned to what they're in for. So that's one area. In terms of AI tooling, I think what's interesting is like the one of the more popular posts I wrote recently was like, this is how I approach AI tooling. Like, here are all
Mm-hmm.
the different tools I tried and my thoughts around them. It doesn't really matter. It really just does not. They're all using the same models, which is either going to be mostly Claude and Gemini. A few of them has OpenAI
Mm-hmm.
Codex models, and a few, even fewer, would have like open source Chinese models from like shit, you know. And they're different, but also not. And what's really important is people just need to like do it and try it. I think it's mildly infuriating for me to watch somebody spend hundreds of dollars to buy an AI course that is on the same quality level, or actually worse quality than if I were to just ask Claude to do it for
Yeah.
me. There's a ADP list sells a $250 AI design course, And I watched some of the videos, and it's just this is how you set up Claude Code. This is how you set up the Figma MCP. You could just go into Claude and just like
Yeah,
connect
that's
Figma
right.
MCP for me, or just show me the step by steps, and I'll just do it for you over 5 minutes. So like, why would you pay money for that? And things are always changing anyway. So the
Hmm.
most important thing is pick any tool. Doesn't matter. Whatever the tool that you're most comfortable with, either you're okay with IDE or interactive development environment, or something that's more palatable for designers like Figma Make or Magic Patterns or Magic Path or Subframe, just use it. It doesn't really matter. Just get your feet wet. I think some of the models are cheaper, some of the tools are cheaper. Just use whatever you're comfortable with, financially speaking.
Hmm.
There's also free tools like Kilo Code or Kilo Kilo that has free open source models you can leverage if money's an issue. And as you use the tool, you'll start to realize where the shortcomings are and what you need, like what it's not able to help you do. And to be honest, all of them allow you to do anything, just that some of it is a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder to spin up a database in Figma Make and Magic Pattern than it is on Replit and on V0. But at the same time, like Lovable, Replit, and V0 cost way more.
Hmm.
So it's a trade off, right? And as you use these tools, you start to understand the trade offs so you can make better decisions. So yeah, like I think the issue right now is, are we using the tools? God, fuck. See, this is the thing. Like, I'm actually not really sure if the things I'm telling you is actually part of the marketing and hype speak
Oh no.
versus like, is this actually
This
useful
was supposed to be a
advice to
no hype
people?
zone. Damn it.
No, I'm serious. Like,
Okay.
why am I recommending these tools? Why am I just telling people to use these tools anyway? Because on the flip side, you can say that these tools are changing so quickly, and it doesn't really matter in some ways. Like, I'll give you another example.
Yeah.
Several years ago, Juan Ramirez, designer who works at Netflix, who is really into AI tooling,
Hmm.
he wrote about how he has AI prompt recipes. So he would feed these recipes into ChatGPT to get superior results versus people who didn't use the prompt recipes. So it's like
Hmm.
custom language that he would use to get better results.
Yeah.
And he said that a lot of prompt engineers or designers are not sharing their prompt recipes because it gives them an unfair advantage. Some of them are selling it, but they're definitely not giving it out for free. And I
This
thought that
has
was
to
really
have been
interesting.
years ago, right?
Yeah,
Like, I
years
mean,
ago.
yeah, yeah.
Years ago. And at that point, I was like, huh, that's really interesting. Should I be developing this on my own as well, trying to learn how to create recipes of my own so I can get better results? And when I started picking up AI tools like several months ago, it didn't really matter. I wrote some like really bad, shitty prompts, and it was perfectly fine. Like, you didn't need prompt recipes anymore because the system prompts that
Yeah.
come with all these tools are so good nowadays that you don't need it anymore. So what I'm trying to get at is, he invested all this time and energy into creating prompt recipes that became irrelevant later on. Now, of course, he's learned other skills, intangible skills that go along with it, but I wouldn't say prompt recipes is like a big skill area that people need to develop nowadays. And it's a trade-off, right? Like, you also, but at the same time, you don't want to focus too hard trying to like decide what to do, what not to do, because you then get into analysis paralysis, which I'm in right now. But
Oh man.
anyway, like, I don't know. Don't listen to me. Just, I don't know what I'm doing.
I agree. I agree. I don't think we should be listening to anybody. I think people should. I mean, I'll add my one final opinion before we go is to take a step back, like with what you were saying about tooling and knowing that people want to like, well, what do I do? It's interesting when you say like, I don't know, am I leaning into the marketing or the hype engine or like this tool versus that? My recommendation would be that most of what if people want to learn those I'm going to call them like second order AI tools like Lovable, Magic Patterns, Pencil. Those are on top of free stuff. And that if anyone wants to learn what NPM means, just Google NPM and then realize that everything that something like Figma Make or Lovable is doing, not with regards to their front end of how they give you an interface, but creating a database. I mean, a SQLite database is free. You just download it. A node server is free. You do that. Downloading a Vite server is free. Like every single thing you need to do to build and replicate the tools that are then being packaged up and sold as a SaaS subscription are free. And if you say, Claude, I need to start at square one, I don't know anything, he'll just walk you through it to the end. And so I mean, that's, I guess, my alternative where people don't know where to start. I would say, don't start with anything that costs money other than like the one subscription you need for whatever you want to use, Claude Code, and like get your API key. And then you can build a front end, a back end, an API, a database. You can host it, Google OAuth, put it on Superbase, put it on Netlify, put it, all that stuff is either there's free tiers or it's 15 bucks, 20 bucks a month, but then you own the entire tool chain and all the data. You're not locked into any vendor and you can switch it out back and forth. So I don't know. That's what I think, because I got into Lovable at first, and I was just like, I feel like I'm just using somebody's UI on top of a bunch of free stuff, and it turns out it was true, and just immediately went like vendorless. But that's, again, like you were saying, it's individual, and you lean into your natural instincts and talents, and then the tool augments that. Like you would never want to be like the Michael Jordan of baseball because he's not good at baseball. So.
It was pretty decent.
I mean, compared
It's
to the
okay.
average person, he's great at owning a NASCAR team. Um,
I'm kidding. But like, what's really interesting is that like you and I are both designers, but we use tools very differently. I actually have no idea what you're doing right now. And I,
I don't either.
yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about half the time. I just know that it's more advanced than I'm comfortable with in some ways.
I don't
And
think I'm designing though, or like, I mean, capital D. I would tell people that I'm doing engineering that uses a lot of design expertise in the process. But I would say at this point I'm 80% engineering at this point. I shouldn't be listened to unless somebody knows that up front.
hmm, it's funny because like I don't even know what I'm doing right now. Like I don't think I'm doing design work even. So it's weird. I really need to like take a step back and think about how does this all fit into my goals of landing a job,
Oof,
because
I
there
mean,
there is
yeah.
no guidebook out there, and we're all figuring it out. And I need to, yeah, I need to think through this more because I'm doing things that are way outside of the path I originally outlined. Right now, it's just like, oh, this seems interesting. I'll do that, and that's not a effective strategy for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I honest to God, I mean, just to editorialize, I don't know really what the jobs are going to look like, anyone's, mine, anyone else, because it just it feels like what the hiring markets and companies are going to want out of people is going to evolve, because the higher up the food chain you go, the more they are
Hmm.
going to react to what the big providers, the big three, Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google want. And then, the second tier companies who like consume and execute, the usage of the big model providers want, and they're going to hire. And so it's like, are we going to be designing designs, or are we going to be doing something that I think it's going to be like founder in residence at different scales, where it's like, well, we don't necessarily need you to produce a design. We need you to produce a functioning whatever that has design and functionality built in and combined. And that might be with something that's completely hands off, where you don't need to know about the back end engineering, or maybe you do know a little bit about it. But I fear that the biggest gap is going to be not in the individual, but in the organizations seeing the design work and seeing the things you can see and interact with, but then also wanting to have what's behind that at the same time, whether you're in any role, design, PM, engineer. I couldn't imagine hiring like a software developer who doesn't also produce something that can be interacted with. like you traditionally would have been able to do. I think it's we're turning 90 degrees, and the specialist roles are going to be specialists, but they're going to be sliced differently. I mean, I wouldn't, if someone started handing me mock-ups right now, I would be like, now I just have to go recode these in Claude Code. Why didn't you just do it? And then I wouldn't
Well,
know where that conversation would go, because we've now just doubled the workload because you spent 4 hours in Figma when you could have spent 4 hours in Claude Code. And
I
we
don't
all know how I
remember.
feel about that.
I don't remember who said this, but I think somebody either wrote a comment or they DM me or something. So I can't take credit for this. Please, if you said this to me, please just let me know so I can credit you. They said that their designer and their engineers still prefer for them to give them mock-ups because they don't want them to fuck around with the code using AI tools. And they know how to use the AI tools to code, and they want control over that. So they still don't want designers to create coded prototype. They want it to use as a prototype to express an idea, but they don't
Yeah,
want to implement their front end code into their repository. So yeah,
that's,
I gotta run soon, but this has been a lot of fun. It's got
yeah,
me
this is
thinking through a
great.
lot of things, and it's just it's like another reminder. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about half the time, and I have all these contradictory ideas in my head as to what is the right thing to do. What like is this right? Is that wrong? Um, I think giving advice right now is really difficult and kind of dangerous in some ways
Mm,
because it's so if I'm talking to individuals, I think we can customize the advice to make sense. But on a wider whole, like in a live stream or on a video, it doesn't make any sense right now.
I mean,
There's just we have such a wide spectrum of designers and their needs and everything is so different across the board. I even think the your audience and my audience are still a very small subset of a lot of design a lot of designers right now, and there's a whole other ecosystem on Twitter and X and elsewhere who would vehemently disagree with a lot of things that we just said, and they would have a lot of points too. It's just yeah, it's a weird space right now.
it is a weird space. Every time someone mentions, I didn't know people went back to Twitter. That's so funny. Apparently, any reputational damage you do can be repaired. Well, thank you for the talk and the impromptu, giving me a break from having to think through content. Do you want to plug anything or have anything you want people to follow, or if you just keep watching your daily posts on who has offended you that you need to do a takedown
Just
on?
check out Trevor Nielsen's profile.
Right on.
Yeah, write a mocking comment or two. Let him know that I sent my regards.
And body pillows are Trevor back. Body pillows back in stock, I've heard, so that's great. Any other merch you got coming out? Any other OnlyFans exclusives?
No, I,
No.
I don't have a whole ton of stuff to sell right now,
Okay.
but someday we'll get there. Can't wait to sell
Well,
out.
thank you. Yeah, I wish. That's the other thing is I think we're also scared about, like you said, we don't really know what to do. We don't know where anything is going. It's too unpredictable. And so at the back of everyone's minds is, am I going to be okay or not? And you look for some sort of lighthouse to guide you, and then you
Yeah,
end up getting a lot of blowhards and a lot of people who want to capitalize on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of what's going on. So I'm glad there's people like you out here who try to stay focused on designers and what the individual needs, and not trying to get people to sign up for courses or buy a product or pitch anything. But you've always been someone who tries to help people by sharing knowledge and giving people the opportunities to decide for themselves. So great guest. I'm glad I didn't have the other person who volunteered to come on. It was actually Trevor. It was crazy. He wanted to talk about Utah and Cache Valley cheese and what USU is up to this year. And I'm just like, I don't want to talk about any of that. So thank you for preventing that from happening.
Yeah, thank God.
Thank God. All
Good
right. Well,
riddance.
have a wonderful Friday, everyone. Hung, have a wonderful Friday down there in New York City. I'm up here in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to go and walk my moose, and we will see you again. I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to stream again. I've kind of lost. There's too much agentic coding going on. I don't do anything, by the way, than code, and at the expense of every other part of my life, including preparing for live streams each week. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Good to see everyone. Take care. Have a great Friday and a
Have a
great weekend.
great Friday.
See you
Bye.
around.